Please take part in this gathering however you feel comfortable. You are welcome to be exactly who you are. We honor each other's skin color, sexuality, age, and gender expression. We embrace the differences and similarities between us and realize that we do not all think the same way or believe the same things or belong to the same. We have found a way forward by waiting on each other. We listen. There is a place for all of us here. Welcome to this gathering of Journey in Perfect Faith.
Sometime after Jesus was born, Magi from the east came to King Herod and asked, "Where's the new king of the Jews? We saw his star rise, and we have come to kiss his hand." That set King Herod and all the people of Jerusalem talking. Herod called together all the learned religious leaders and asked, could they be talking about the Messiah? Where do the old prophecies say the Messiah will be born? And the religious leaders told him that 700 years earlier, the prophet Micah had said, "Out of you, Bethlehem, will come a ruler who will be the shepherd of my people of Israel." The Magi lost no time in getting back on the road, for they were very close indeed. Bethlehem is only a few miles from Jerusalem. And behold, the star they had seen went before ahead of them, and having arrived, it stood over the place where the child was. And having now seen the star, they rejoiced greatly and with exceedingly great joy, and also rejoicing with more joy. Upon entering the house, they saw the child and his mother Mary, and they bowed down and kissed his hand. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with their gifts. Then, having been warned in a dream to avoid Herod, they returned to their country by another route.
Thank you, Margaret. That was wonderful. There is a lot, I don't know if you noticed this, but there's a lot of seeing going on in Matthew's story about the Magi this morning. Think about that passage and talk to me. What are things seen in this story?
Star.
The star.
Yep.
Prophecy.
Prophecy.
They saw Herod.
Herod.
They eventually see Mary and Jesus.
Yes, they do.
They saw a little bit anyway behind Herod what was going on, perhaps with their inner eye.
Yes. Yes. And they see
like the dream, they have the dream. They see in the dream that they need to avoid Herod. Yeah.
They see in the dream, and they see the star stop, right? That it says, it once having arrived, it stopped. So Matthew seems to be making like a real point about seeing in this story. So let's take a moment to think a little more deeply about what is seen and what is unseen here. In that day and age, Magi were usually like very high up in government. They worked for the kings. They are senior advisors. They're political operators, and they are often quite literally wise men. And they have different areas of expertise. Some Magi are magicians. Some are seers, what people of the time would call prophets. Some are astronomers, maybe astrologers. The line's a little fuzzy there, and some are simply men gifted with wisdom and knowledge. So these particular Magi seem to be in the astronomer/astrologer area of expertise. And it's likely that the gifts the Magi bring are not from themselves, but from the king or the kings they represent. I've always thought they were from somewhere like China. They're always portrayed as being Oriental, right? But that's not actually in the story anywhere. It just says they are in the East. And my best guess is that they are probably from Persia. And the reason I think that is because at this point, the world for the Jews in Palestine is more or less bounded by Rome to the west and Persia to the east. And the Romans and the Persians struggle against each other for hundreds more years. But our story at the time of Jesus centers on Palestine in the West, where the Romans are firmly in control. Now, the Romans are an efficient, ruthless fighting machine, but they are also politically astute. When they conquer a country, they set up governors, loyalists, definitely loyalists, but they make an effort to see that those governors are local political leaders, recognized leaders who know the people, the customs, and the history of the conquered land. And the Romans don't even mind if the governors call themselves kings, as long as they know who's really the boss. So this is the sort of king that King Herod is. His boss is Rome. And that's why Matthew's story of the Magi is completely and totally subversive. Matthew is explicitly saying there's a new king in town, and the new king is recognized by the kings of other powerful nations, nations from the east, nations like Persia, nations that are not necessarily subject to Rome. So let that sink in. There's a new king in Herod's backyard who is recognized as king of Palestine at the very least, maybe more, by other nations who are not subject to Rome. From Herod's point of view, this is a disaster. Now, Herod considers himself a Jew, not by birth, but by conversion. And his actions do not speak of the change of heart that might be expected from actually worshiping God, right? But he's at least heard of the Messiah. He knows that the Hebrew Bible, what we call the Old Testament, predicts that God will raise up a great king of peace and righteousness and justice. And the fact that the Magi say that the birth of the king they are seeking has been portended by a sign in the heavens makes Herod immediately think that perhaps this new king is the Messiah. The problem is that Herod knows that the Messiah is not going to be subject to the rule of Rome. And that spells the end of Herod's source of power, especially if this Messiah is backed by kingdoms other than Rome. So that's why Herod secretly plots to find and kill this baby king, no matter what it takes. But for now, let's think about these Magi, these powerful, learned men who see some sort of astrological sign that Matthew calls a star. And to the Magi, this rising star is the sign of the birth of a king of great importance. All the Christmas cards that have stars with rays pointing down exactly to Jesus' home in Bethlehem make no sense, at least to me. Herod himself could have followed such a star. Everyone could have. Everyone would have. Stars don't work like that. No conjunction of planets works like that. We know this. It's common sense. So the face of the story clearly has some gaps. And it's the gaps that interest me. My mother is a professional artist, and I've probably told you before, but she once taught me that to draw a chair, you need to draw the space around the chair, not the chair itself. That way, your left brain won't get in the way and try to control the accuracy of your drawing. And she was right. It is amazing the difference it makes to perceive the space around the chair. And an astronomer once told me that the best way to see a very dim star is to look off slightly to the side of the star, not directly at it. And that works too. We need to look at the spaces in Matthew's story. We need to see the gaps. Earlier, we noticed that the Magi see the Messiah's star when it rises, and then they travel to Jerusalem to meet with King Herod. Then, when they leave King Herod and head for Bethlehem, they see the star again and are overjoyed. Margaret, will you pull up that next slide, please? Thank you. So it says, and behold. Now, behold is like a verbal exclamation point, idou, in the Greek. And it means something unexpected happened. Behold. In Texas, we'd say, hey, looky there, right? So that's what that means in the Greek. Behold. And then the passage says the star they had seen before. That's what we would call past tense. Tenses in Greek and English are different, but it means something that already happened. And then it says, having now seen the star, as they were leaving King Herod's court, they rejoiced greatly with exceedingly great joy, which Margaret very beautifully pointed out is like a double. It's like they rejoiced, and then the Greek says over again, they rejoiced like exceedingly great. This was like a big deal. So that sounds to me like the star disappeared in between the time they saw it first and the time they got to King Herod's court. Isn't that what this sounds like? No wonder they were overjoyed to see it, because it sounds like it had disappeared. Perhaps it has been gone the whole trip. One way or another, God's sign disappears and they are left on a dangerous road with nothing but a memory of what they had seen. It is a big, huge gap. Okay, Margaret, you can close this slide. Thank you. So this trip takes many months, over a year for sure. We know that because Herod quizzes the Magi about exactly when they saw the new king's star rise. And after the Magi leave, Herod orders all male babies under the age of 2 killed. So we know that Jesus is probably 18 months old or so when the Magi arrive. Jesus escapes death only because his father Joseph is warned in a dream to take his little family and flee to Egypt. So these Magi have traveled over a year to get here. Now, they're coming up along the Euphrates River. This is a great merchant route, and Babylon is on that route. There's all these big, huge cities, and it's a big deal. And they surely make several other diplomatic stops along the way, which would account for why it takes them so long. I mean, they got to convince their kings, and they've got to get the gifts all together, and they make this trip. So that, accounts for why it takes them, 18 months to get there, more or less. And during that time, they apparently do not see the star. Those Magi saw the star rise. They figured out what it meant. Then they set out for Jerusalem using the ancient, well-traveled, but extremely dangerous merchant routes that trace their way along the great Euphrates River. They undoubtedly have like armed guards to protect their precious gifts, many servants to attend to their needs and the needs of the animals. What they don't have is a star guiding them. And we know that because they are overjoyed when the star shows up again as they travel from Herod's court in Jerusalem to Bethlehem. Now, this would have happened during a single night. We know that because Bethlehem is only a few miles from Jerusalem, not far at all. It's not a multi-day trip. So at least as the story goes, the star rises again the very night they set out from Jerusalem. Now, we already figured out that the star isn't mapping the way to Bethlehem. There's a road for that. If we take at face value that it is indeed a celestial star or planet or nova or something, common sense tells us that it can't pinpoint an exact location on Earth. It's not GPS. Maybe I'm wrong, but it seems to me that it is simply the reappearance of the star that lets them know they are on the right track, that they are heading for the correct king now. And I imagine this is a big relief. For one thing, they expected to find the new king at the court in Jerusalem. But they've been told there is no new king and have been sent off to this backwater podunk town to find what might or might not be the Messiah. They were basically told, no king here, but there are some 700-year-old prophecies that say a great king will someday be born in Bethlehem. Good luck with that. Let us know if you find anything. So what must they be thinking? Here they are on the road from Jerusalem to Bethlehem, and their trip seems a complete bust. What in the world are they going to tell their own kings when they get back home after having spent all this money on this gigantic trip? Plus, they'll have egg all over their faces for misreading the sign in the sky. They will surely lose their own lucrative jobs. This is a complete disaster. And then the star shows up again. They must have melted with relief. Tears must be streaming down their faces as they see God's sign, finally, again, after all this time. It doesn't take long to find Jesus once they get to Bethlehem. It's only been a year or two, and everyone remembers the night the shepherds in the fields went berserk and tore up the whole town looking for a baby in a manger. Everyone in Bethlehem knows who Jesus is and where he lives. This story speaks to me, to our human experience. What happened to the Magi happens to us. We see what we believe is the Spirit beckoning us, and we step out and poof, it can seem as if we are suddenly alone and full of doubt. Do we keep going? Do we stop and wait until we can feel God again? Do we figure out we got it wrong somehow and turn around and go back? Or do we trust that original urging of the Spirit and let go of our need to know how it will all work out? Can we let go of the goal and let the goal rest in God's hands? Can we focus on our part, putting one foot in front of the other, taking the next best step, feeling our way towards what is loving and compassionate and courageous and good? That gap between the stars is hard. for the Magi, the star disappears. But they plow ahead because they know they have seen that star. They trust their learning and experience. They risk their livelihoods and their reputations for this. And when all seems utterly lost, when by all human measures they have failed, they still keep going because there is still a chance, still hope that somehow, some way, there is indeed a new king. And at that lowest place, when they think they've lost it all, God shows up again. And they find that king, the Messiah, the one anointed to his place by God and not by empire. They find the king of peace and righteousness and justice. The day we celebrate in this story is called the Epiphany. It's a wonderful word. It can mean a sudden appearance of something special, in particular, someone sent by God, a person, an angel, even God's own self. And it can also mean suddenly realizing something we've never realized before. Epiphany is all about making a sudden connection. And it happens to us so often. We have phrases in our language to express this experience. We say, oh, it suddenly dawned on me that that's an epiphany. We say, aha, the light just came on. We even have a smack your head emoji, you know, this epiphanies are a thing. We know about them. And I think it's no accident that we associate an epiphany with a light coming on, with things dawning on us. It's no accident that Matthew's story centers on a star. An epiphany is when we realize that something significant, we realize something we did not understand before, and that knowledge is embedded deep within our hearts and minds. It is a grounded truth. It is enough to get us through all the failures and all the hard times. It is enough to get us through the loss of our livelihoods and our homes and our health and even our loved ones. We don't have epiphanies every moment of every day. There are gaps between epiphanies, but they're just gaps. God's eyes are on us all the time, all the time. God delights in being present to us, even if we have no awareness of God's presence because of all the noise and the pain in our lives. God is still there. And there's another thing about epiphanies. Epiphanies always seem to be good. They lead us out of bad situations. They shine light in dark places. They connect us with each other and with God. And so today, I leave you to ponder both the epiphanies and the gaps in your own life. There's a marvelous British phrase that blares every time you step in one of their subway cars. Mind the gap, mind the gap. They're telling you to step fully forward and don't twist your ankle in the gap between the platform and the subway car. My gift to you today is the knowledge that the gap between epiphanies and the gaps between those times when God feels close, all the gaps are just temporary. Keep traveling. Trust that you heard God right. Sure, mind the gap. Don't let it trip you up. But keep pressing forward in the sure knowledge that another God encounter, another epiphany, is only a step away.
I'm Alan. I'm a journeyer. I really like this gap discussion about that space, not focusing on the light, but the dark between the light. That's interesting. You may have noticed that at this worship, we did not do the breathing and calming at the beginning of the service. We're going to do it here at the kind of the end and combine it with praying. That's purposeful. Our breaths are like the gaps. They're like the liminal space that is empty. And into that gap, God will call into being what does not yet exist. I think about there's a proverb that says, "Be still and know that I am God." And as I was reading what Gayle wrote about this, I was also reminded of something somebody else said, that even the name Yahweh, the Hebrew name Yahweh, is breath. It is the sound of breathing in, saying Yah, and breathing out. So I invite you to relax and do some breaths, slow breaths with me. And when you breathe in, think or kind of mouth Yah. And when you breathe out, Way. So let's do that and find God in those gaps as you're thinking that. Another time. One more time, slowly. In that way, you can continue. The mere act of breathing is a prayer. Sometimes those prayers don't need to be spoken.
Amen.
Sometimes we need those gaps.
Thank you, Alan. Hi, I'm Nathalie. This week, Richard Rohr's Center for Action and Contemplation sent a devotional written by one of their teachers, Barbara Holmes, a woman of color. Her words speak wisdom into the gap. As an African-American woman, I wear darkness as a skin color that I love. It is a reminder of my African origins, hidden in my genes, but not accessible through memory. Without darkness, I would not be. I stopped being afraid of the dark. I realized that sight and insight were not dependent upon the glaring light produced by humans, for there was an inner light, a wholeness that glows and revealed much more. We can depend on this wholeness when it's experienced as a dark night of the soul for individuals, or an eclipse of the ordinary for the community. I want to say that again because that's where we are. We can depend on this wholeness when it's experienced as an eclipse of the ordinary for a community. During an eclipse, we have a dimming of the familiar and a loss of the taken for granted clues that we rely on every day to remind us of who we are and why we're here. Could there be a blessing for us in the shadow? The eclipse reminds us to linger in the darkness, to savor the silence, to embrace the shadow, for the light is coming. The resurrection is afoot. Transformation is unfolding. For God is working in the secret and in the silence to create us anew. Gayle sent that to me, and I read it and copied it and reread it. And about 4 or 5 hours later, this came to me, and this is what I wrote. It is up to us now. Jesus left a long time ago. Many others have come and are gone. Someone brought the message to me in a way I heard. Truth became real and personal then. God's work gets passed down through generations from those who say yes. It's up to us now. Will we let go of desires, hopes for our future? Will we become those who listen for guidance, not just deciding on our own? Will we accept all created beings as our family? Can Spirit freely move within us and out from us without restraint? This thought is beautiful, terrifying, breaking through all my denial. I send you out with this blessing. God is with us. Amen.